The sun hung like a furnace over the scorched Ujani Flats Wildlife Reserve in eastern Botswana. What was once a fertile savanna had turned into a graveyard of cracked earth and brittle thorns. For weeks, the drought had shown no mercy, and now, wandering alone through the haze of dust and heat, came a shadow, Ashira, a lone black panther, her obsidian coat dulled by dust, her ribs sharp against stretched skin. Behind her, barely keeping pace, limped her two cubs, thin, trembling, eyes wide with hunger and confusion. Ashira had once ruled the dense riverine thickets of the northern delta, but the drought had drained the rivers and driven the prey deep into unfamiliar lands. With no choice left, she had crossed into open plains, territory ruled by lions and hyenas, unwelcoming and ruthless. Her strength waned with each passing hour. A former phantom of the forest, now she was a ghost of herself. She hadn't made a kill in over 2 weeks, and her milk was gone. Yet despite her failing body, she shielded her cubs from the scorching sun and stalking eyes. Every step was a gamble, every breath a battle. As the wind picked up, carrying the scent of predators and death, Ashira didn't stop. She couldn't. Somewhere in her fading heartbeat, a mother's instinct still burned, silent, wild, and unbreakable. She wasn't just running from hunger, she was racing against time, and something out there was watching her, waiting. The real test had only just begun. By late afternoon, the sun burned low and cruel over the Ujani Flats. Ashira found a rare patch of shade beneath a skeletal umbrella thorn tree, her cubs collapsing beside her in silence. Their tiny chests rose and fell with shallow breaths, too weak even to whimper. Ashira's eyes, dull but alert, scanned the horizon. She knew this land was not hers. She was an intruder, and intruders bled. A shrill cackle shattered the quiet. From the shadows of the brush, hyenas emerged, 5 of them, lean and restless, their mottled coats bristling with anticipation. They moved with practiced malice, circling the panther like vultures around carrion. Ashira rose on trembling legs, her body a canvas of dust and scars, her tail twitching like a warning flare. The lead hyena lunged. With a hiss that sounded more like thunder than breath, Ashira struck. Her claws flashed, a black blur slicing through the air. Blood splattered the dry earth. The hyena yelped, retreating with a torn muzzle. But the others surged forward. The next minutes were chaos. Fangs, claws, dust, and fury. Ashira fought like a creature possessed, every ounce of her dwindling strength summoned to protect the only things she had left in this world. Her cubs cowered behind her, wide-eyed and shaking, but unharmed. When the dust finally settled, the hyenas limped away, bloodied and broken. Ashira stood, sides heaving, blood dripping from her flank. Then she collapsed. A queen had defended her kingdom, but at what cost? Somewhere in the thorns, something else stirred, and witnessed it all. At dawn, with the sky still a pale violet bruise above the horizon, Ranger Kazi Malelo rolled out from his base camp in the southern zone of Ujani Flats Reserve. He had worked these lands for nearly 15 years, long enough to know when something in the rhythm of the wilderness shifted. That morning, it was a feeling in his chest, a whisper in the wind, like the bush itself was uneasy. He was scanning the landscape from his vehicle when he spotted them. Paw prints, deep and uneven in the dust, the strides staggered and light. They weren't lion, and they weren't fresh, but they were too large, too wide-set to belong to a cheetah or leopard. His heart quickened. Black Panther? Here? Following the tracks with slow, measured patience, he traced them past withered bushes and scorched termite mounds, the trail weaving south toward an isolated patch of thorn trees. As he crested a slight rise, he saw them, Ashira and her cubs, collapsed beneath the fragile shade. The cubs whimpered but didn't flee. Ashira barely moved. Kazi's breath caught in his throat. She was a legend, a myth among rangers, the ghost of the northern delta. And here she was, not regal or fierce, but shattered. Yet even in her brokenness, there was majesty. Kazi stepped down from the vehicle, his boots crunching the brittle soil. He knew he had to move fast. The panther was still alive, but just barely. And so were her cubs. This was a race now, against time and death. Ranger Kazi knelt beside the motionless form of Ashira, her obsidian coat now streaked with blood and dust. Her sides barely moved, shallow, uneven breaths that whispered how close she was to the edge. Her cubs whimpered softly, nudging her flank with desperate snouts, unsure whether to fear the human or hope for him. Kazi's hands, weathered by years of bush life, moved with urgency but care. He radioed the base. "Female panther, critical. 2 cubs alive. I need a vet team, immediately." While waiting for help, Kazi opened his emergency kit. He knelt close, whispering calmly, as if his voice alone might tether her to this world. Gently, he cleaned her wounds and injected a dose of stimulant beneath her skin. Ashira flinched but didn't wake. Her body trembled faintly, signs of life flickering. Then he turned to the cubs. From his pack, Kazi pulled out a bottle of diluted milk formula. The cubs hesitated, their golden eyes watching him with wide uncertainty. Then one stepped forward. Hunger won. The first sip was hesitant. The second was ravenous. Soon, both were feeding, tiny bodies pressed against the ranger's boots, trembling less with every gulp. As twilight painted the reserve in hues of violet and ash, Ashira stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, until they landed on her cubs. A low, broken growl escaped her lips, not a threat, but a mother's response. They were alive, still hers. And for the first time in weeks, hope moved through her broken frame. She wasn't alone anymore. The morning after the battle, a hush blanketed the Ujani Flats, a silence heavy with tension and possibility. Ranger Kazi returned before dawn, heart clenched with hope and dread. He approached the familiar acacia slowly, breath catching when he saw a flicker of movement. Ashira, still alive, barely. She lifted her head weakly, eyes glassy but aware. Her cubs stirred beside her, now slightly more alert, their limbs trembling but no longer limp with despair. Kazi knelt and laid out the rationed meat, fresh, still warm from the cooler. The scent drifted through the dry air. At first, Ashira only watched, her instincts tangled in distrust and exhaustion. But then, with the smallest twitch of her nose, she pulled herself forward and bit down. The cubs followed, feasting in silence, their bellies finally soothed. Over the next 10 days, Kazi returned like clockwork, each visit bringing food and whispered reassurances. He kept his distance, knowing this bond was one of necessity, not ownership. Ashira, ever watchful, slowly regained the fire in her gaze. Her coat began to shine again under the relentless sun, her gait steadying, her muscles filling out. The cubs transformed from shadows to life, pouncing, growling softly, mimicking their mother's every move. Each day was a step up from the abyss. By day 10, Kazi stood a little farther back, watching from behind his vehicle as Ashira nuzzled her cubs before prowling into the wind. She was no longer a ghost. She was becoming a hunter once more. The dawn of the 11th day arrived with a wind less cruel, the sky tinged with a promise of change. Ashira lay under a cluster of shrubs, her cubs nestled beside her, full, content, their coats now glimmering faintly with health. Ranger Kazi had left another portion of meat hours earlier, but Ashira had barely touched it. Her golden eyes scanned the plains with a renewed fire. The ghost was rising. As the sun crept higher, a stir rippled through the grasses. A lone springbok wandered too close, skinny, distracted, grazing the brittle shoots sprouting after a rare night mist. Ashira rose, not out of desperation, but instinct. Grace replaced the staggering gait of days past. Her body, once emaciated, now moved like oil on stone, silent, fluid, lethal. She crouched. The cubs watched, eyes wide with wonder. With a whisper of wind, she sprang. The kill was clean, a silent explosion of muscle and precision. The springbok fell without a cry, and Ashira stood over it, chest heaving, her obsidian coat catching the light like polished stone. A roar ripped from her throat, not one of rage or fear, but of triumph. A declaration. The hunter had returned. From a distant ridge, Kazi watched, binoculars trembling in his grip. A smile tugged at the corners of his sun-worn face. He didn't need to interfere now. The wild had taken her back. Ashira nudged her cubs forward, and together they feasted, not as victims of the drought, but as survivors reclaiming their place in the kingdom of predators. From the shadowed ridge above the golden plains, Ranger Kazi lay prone, binoculars pressed to his brow, barely breathing. Below him, in a quiet clearing brushed by dusk's fading light, Ashira and her cubs lay sprawled in the grass, safe, full, and alive. The cubs nuzzled playfully at their mother's side, their tiny roars echoing like whispers through the still air. Kazi didn't move. He didn't dare disturb the moment. He had witnessed nature's cruelest edges in this drought, but this was something rare. A second chance. Ashira lifted her head, her eyes, amber, deep, ancient, locked onto his. Kazi froze. There was no fear in her gaze, no warning, just something deeper, knowing. A moment stretched between them, silent and sacred. In that one look, she spoke of gratitude, of trust forged not through words or training, but through shared survival. He had not caged her, had not claimed her. He had simply offered help and stepped back into the shadows. And she had remembered. The Black Panther turned her attention back to her cubs, grooming them gently, her body now more muscle than bone. The cubs tumbled over each other, tiny roars growing stronger by the day. Kazi lowered his binoculars and exhaled. There was nothing more he could do now. Ashira had reclaimed her place in the wild, and her cubs would grow up beneath her strength, not because of man's intervention, but because of her own unstoppable will. The ranger rose quietly and walked away, leaving the mother to the wild. Ashira's journey is more than survival. It's a reminder of the fierce love that lives in every mother's heartbeat and the quiet power of resilience. In a world scorched by drought and danger, she didn't give up. She stood, fought, and rose again, not for herself, but for her cubs. And through it all, she never lost her grace. Sometimes, life will strip us bare, test our strength, and leave us gasping. But even then, something wild and sacred within us endures. Like Ashira, we fight not because we are unafraid, but because we must. Her silent bond with the ranger shows us that compassion doesn't need words, just presence, just heart. If Ashira's story touched you the way it touched us, if her courage inspired something deep inside, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more true stories of resilience, love, and the wild.